We begin tonight with the death in prison of a former friend of Donald Trump's, a man who Donald Trump called a terrific guy, who, with Donald Trump's full approval, liked girls who, in Donald Trump's words, were, quote, on the younger side. It took the death of an accused child rapist and sex trafficker and friend of presidents Trump and Clinton to unite the Democrats and Republicans on the House Judiciary Committee in the search for information from Donald Trump and William Barr's Justice Department. But it was his job to keep Jeffrey Epstein alive. It was also William Barr's job to keep Jeffrey Epstein alive. And Attorney General Barr said today, in effect, don't blame me. Attorney General Barr claimed to be, quote, appalled and angry, those were his words, about the death of Jeffrey Epstein. And he made it very clear that Hugh Hurwitz is in line to take the fall for this one.
We are now learning of serious irregularities at this facility that are deeply concerning and demand a thorough investigation.
So William Barr is clearly going to point downward and blame Hugh Hurwitz or someone lower down the chain of command at the Federal Correction Center in New York, where Jeffrey Epstein died. Maybe the Barr investigation will ultimately point the finger at the unionized guards who failed to keep Jeffrey Epstein alive. White House is the craziest White House in history. It is the most reckless group of people who have ever worked in a White House, and the president himself is the most reckless of them all. The Judiciary Committee's letter, signed by the top Democrat and the top Republican on the committee, is asking if anyone in the Trump White House was involved or aware of the removal of the suicide watch of Jeffrey Epstein. That's what's in question number 14. Was the termination, was William Barr involved? Was Donald Trump involved? That is what is in question number 14. And the House Judiciary Committee is going to get answers to these questions. Leading off our discussion tonight, Mimi Roker, former assistant U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York. She is an MSNBC legal contributor, and John Heilman, national affairs analyst for NBC News and MSNBC. He is co-host and executive producer of Showtime's The Circus.
Well, and there will be video that will be part of the puzzle that they're going to have to piece together. There won't be video in the cell because of privacy rights, but there will be video from the hallways. They will be, I'm sure they're already looking, somebody is going through whatever video can be gone through. They are looking at who did Epstein speak to? Who did he have phone calls with? Who did he have contact with in the time between when he was taken off suicide watch and killed himself, presumably? Every personnel, everyone who works there is going to be interviewed and questioned separately and carefully. But the real problem here in my mind is we need answers, and we need both the public and the victims to trust the answers that we get. And with Bill Barr at the helm and doing what he's already doing, which is spinning this like he did with the Mueller report, how can anybody trust it? He had been recused. He unrecused himself to take responsibility over the Southern District investigation. And now he's already disclaiming responsibility, as you said. And I think for anyone to have faith in what the findings are, which are so important to the victims and the justice system as a whole, Bill Barr must recuse himself.
Does the word hypocrisy mean anything to you, Lawrence? I mean, this is not a new thing for this Republican Party in this age of Donald Trump to cast aside all prior alleged convictions or commitments to how responsibility works, where the buck stops in situations like this. I think it's, you've seen the cognitive dissonance as you watched before the Epstein event. On Friday, you had the names of some prominent people who were implicated in the Epstein thing. You saw Bill Richardson's name, you saw George Mitchell's name come out, and you saw Donald Trump's name, and you saw Bill Clinton's name. And yet, over the weekend, you have the Trump administration, people around Donald Trump basically saying, pointing to Bill Clinton as the president stoked this conspiracy theory by retweeting someone who claimed that this is, part of the Clinton body count. Yet, it is the case that both of them were known historical consorts of Jeffrey Epstein, and only one of them is the current president of the United States, whose Justice Department runs the federal prison system. So I'm not engaging in any conspiracy theories, just to say, if you are going to start asking about culpability and you're going to start pointing fingers, the place to start looking is with the government that runs that facility. And that goes all the way up to this Attorney General who has shown over and over again that he is in this game, first and foremost, to protect Donald Trump above all.
Given his job, his first job in New York at a private high school in New York by William Barr's father, Barr's father, as the headmaster of school, actually hired this guy. That's plenty of grounds right there for Barr to recuse himself. But he didn't, as you pointed out in this case, which means he left himself in charge fully of the incarceration of Jeffrey Epstein. What efforts did he personally make with that facility to explaining to them the importance of this prisoner?
Exactly. I mean, he's now saying, I mean, in his statement today, when he was speaking, he said, you know, this is such an important case. If it were that important of a case that you said, you know what, I'm so invested in this case that I'm going to put aside those maybe apparent conflicts that people might have issue with because I want to oversee this. I want to make sure it's done right this time around. Well, then you should have said from the top down, whatever resources you need to protect this man, the same way they did with El Chapo, right? I mean, It's not like they aren't capable of doing it. Whatever resources you need, I will get you. I'm not saying there aren't systematic problems on a day-to-day basis in the MCC, MDC, other prisons that maybe will come to light as a result of this and be addressed. But he could have reached out, he should have reached out, especially given his position, and said, I am giving you the resources you need to make sure Jeffrey Epstein goes to trial and sees that day of trial.
And so, John, as Mimi said in her first statement tonight, William Barr is already spinning this. He goes out there today and goes way beyond anything we know in the news reports and says serious irregularities in this facility, which he supervises, which is under his jurisdiction. And that, again, is William Barr stepping out ahead of what we know before we're allowed to know, and then not giving us any hint of what an irregularity is.
Funnily enough, we've seen Bill Barr do this before, step out ahead of everything we know and cast events in a certain way, spin them in a certain way. It's part of a troubling pattern, I think, on the part of the Attorney General. And I will say, you know, we don't know when he says there are troubling irregularities. We do not know if he's talking historically. We do not know if he's really just referring specifically to this case. There clearly are some irregularities with respect to this case. The question is whether he's casting an aspersion that he's trying to now claim that these problems have been systemic and have gone on for years and years. And so although, you know, it happened on my watch, I can't be responsible for problems that have been festering in this prison for many, many decades. We'll see if that's where we go, but don't be surprised if that is where we go.
We have another report in the New York Times tonight from James Stewart. He reports of an interview he had with Epstein last year where Epstein points to a picture saying that's MBS, referring to Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. The Crown Prince had visited him many times and they spoke often, Mr. Epstein said. Maybe if that's true, that's just one indicator of the kinds of people who may be exposed in the continuing of this investigation.
Yeah, look, when the fact that Jeffrey Berman, the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York, put out a statement on a Saturday, I mean, that's unusual for them to just put out a statement at all about a case so quickly over a weekend. And the fact that he made that point about there being a conspiracy and we're going to continue investigating and we want victims to come forward, I don't think he would have done that if there was just sort of, you know, hey, let's throw it up and see what happens. I mean, that would be pretty risky on his part. So they clearly have already, I think, some idea where this is going in terms of co-conspirators. Whether that turns out to be, you know, Justine, I can't pronounce her name, Maxwell, and or other more high-profile people, I don't know. But they are going to keep pursuing this, both, I think, criminally and civilly in terms of forfeiture of his assets.
Conspiracies are rarely conducted alone. Conspiracies usually involve co-conspirators, and we have some idea about some of the people who are close to Jeffrey Epstein. Ms. Maxwell is one of those people who's pointed to frequently. It is the case, I believe, not being a lawyer, but having listened to a lot of smart lawyers over the weekend, that the one positive element of this entire thing, and there are, I mean, it's obviously a really dark turn of events, but the notion that there will now no longer be standing or the ability to challenge the searches of all of Jeffrey Epstein's properties, of all of his bank records, that he won't have lawyers who have standing now to fight. So if there are going to be cases brought against co-conspirators, should they exist, it should now be, for a committed prosecutor or a set of prosecutors, easier to get evidence of that conspiracy than it would have been previously with Jeffrey Epstein's lawyers fighting at every turn. And that will be, I think, one of the tests of whether or not this investigation is serious or not. Are we now going to see prosecutors and investigators just ransacking every element of Jeffrey Epstein's life in order to try to find whatever as evidence exists of anyone who is complicit, whether they're a co-conspirator or just complicit in this behavior, because that, I think, is what the victims are owed?
Well, look, the Inspector General's report, I think they generally make their findings public, and they are, reasonably independent from Bill Barr, although part of the Department of Justice. I think that we have a good chance of knowing that. The FBI investigation, and by the way, I'm not casting aspersions on the FBI agents themselves. This is about Barr overseeing it. That, if it's a criminal investigation, we would only know about if they brought criminal charges against someone, and I think it's just too early to say that. I think also, obviously, through House oversight, we will get some answers. So, yes, I think we will get the answers. I think it's, probably going to take longer than people want, which is why Bill Barr should not be doing what he's doing already, which is putting out a few little select cryptic facts with his spin on it.
And pointing downward with the blame. Mimi Roken, John Heilman, thank you both for starting us off tonight.